Ayan Rathor and Niara Sun seemed like the perfect couple, wealthy, respected, and deeply in love. But behind closed doors, a secret past and a shocking discovery would turn their dream honeymoon into a deadly nightmare. Ayan Rathor was known in Jaipur as a disciplined and ambitious man who carefully shaped every part of his life. He came from a respected business family and worked hard to maintain an image of success, stability, and control. Friends described him as quiet and private, someone who avoided conflict and valued reputation above all else. When news of his marriage spread, many believed he had finally completed the picture of a perfect life. The bride, Niara's son, appeared to fit seamlessly into that image. She was graceful, well-spoken, and carried herself with a calm confidence that impressed elders and relatives alike. Their wedding took place in a luxurious venue filled with lights, rituals, and celebration. Hundreds of guests attended, praising the couple as they performed traditional ceremonies. Photographs captured smiling faces, folded hands, and symbolic gestures of unity. Yet beneath the surface, there were small signs no one questioned at the time. Niara often grew silent during conversations about her past. Ayan avoided introducing her to certain old acquaintances. These moments passed unnoticed amid music and celebration. In the days following the wedding, preparations for the honeymoon moved quickly. Ayan chose a remote hill destination, far from crowded tourist spots and familiar faces. He claimed it was for privacy and peace. Niara agreed without hesitation, though her expression often seemed tense. Family members noticed she kept checking her phone and deleting messages, but assumed it was stress from wedding exhaustion. As the newly married couple left the city together, blessings followed them. No one imagined that the journey meant to mark a new beginning would soon turn into a dark chapter of deception, fear, and irreversible loss. The resort they arrived at was hidden deep within the hills, surrounded by tall pine trees and narrow roads that disappeared into fog. It was far from busy towns, chosen deliberately for its isolation and silence. The wooden structure stood alone, with only a few rooms occupied during that season. Weak mobile signals and long stretches of quiet made the place feel cut off from the outside world. What seemed romantic at first slowly turned unsettling. From the moment they checked in, the atmosphere between Ayan and Niara felt strained. Staff members noticed that the couple spoke very little to each other. Meals were ordered to the room, untouched for long periods. Curtains stayed drawn even during daylight. Niara rarely stepped outside, and when she did, her eyes constantly scanned the surroundings as if she feared being recognized. Ayan, on the other hand, appeared restless. He spent long hours staring at his phone or laptop, his expression sharp and distant. Planned activities like sightseeing and guided walks were repeatedly canceled. The resort manager assumed they wanted privacy, yet something about their behavior felt unusual. Late at night, lights in their room stayed on while the rest of the resort slept. Footsteps were heard pacing back and forth. The stillness of the mountains seemed to magnify every movement. Inside that quiet room, the tension grew heavier with each passing hour. The honeymoon no longer felt like a celebration of marriage, but like a space filled with unspoken fear and hidden thoughts. The distance between them was no longer physical, but emotional, shaped by secrets waiting to surface. In that isolation, with no family, friends, or familiar distractions, the truth had nowhere left to hide. On the third evening, the silence inside the room became heavier than before. Ayan sat alone, near the window, while rain tapped against the glass. His mind was restless, filled with doubts he could no longer ignore. Earlier that day, he had noticed something unusual on the shared laptop they had been using for travel plans. An old email account appeared logged in, one that did not match Niara's current name. Curiosity slowly turned into suspicion, and he began opening files that were never meant to be seen. What he uncovered felt unreal. The emails revealed a different identity, connected to cities far from Jaipur. There were traces of past relationships, unexplained money transfers, and legal notices that had been carefully hidden. Documents showed a history of financial manipulation and identity changes that stretched back several years. The woman he had married seemed like a carefully constructed version, built to erase everything that came before. Each new detail deepened his shock and confusion. As the night grew darker, Ayan's thoughts spiraled. He imagined the whispers that would follow if this past became public. His family's reputation, his business ties, and his carefully guarded image all felt threatened. The sense of betrayal cut deeply, turning love into mistrust within hours. He began replaying every moment of their courtship, searching for signs he had missed. The isolation of the resort intensified everything. There was no one to advise him, no familiar voices to slow his thoughts. Fear mixed with anger, and anger slowly hardened into something colder. By the time the rain stopped outside, Ayan was no longer thinking clearly. The discovery had changed him. What started as hidden information had now become the trigger for a chain of events that could not be undone. After the discovery, Ayan's behavior changed in ways that were subtle at first but quickly became disturbing. He stopped responding to messages from family and ignored repeated calls from work. His focus narrowed to a single thought that refused to leave his mind. He believed he had been trapped in a lie that threatened to destroy everything he had built. The idea of facing public shame felt unbearable, and the fear of exposure began to dominate his thoughts. Sleep no longer came easily. Long hours passed with him sitting motionless, staring at nothing. When he did rest, his dreams were filled with images of judgment and loss. His appetite disappeared, and the untouched food trays piled up outside the room. The silence of the mountains, once peaceful, now amplified every thought, making it impossible to escape his own mind. Ayan began reviewing Niara's digital history repeatedly, as if searching for justification rather than truth. Each file strengthened his belief that control was slipping from his hands. He convinced himself that he was the victim of a carefully planned deception. The more he replayed the details, the more his thinking shifted away from reason. His sense of morality blurred, replaced by a growing need to protect his image at any cost. Isolation played a crucial role in his mental collapse. With no outside perspective, his fears fed on themselves. He imagined future scenarios where the past would surface and ruin him completely. What once might have been confronted calmly now felt like an immediate threat. By the fourth day, Ayan was no longer thinking about right or wrong. His mind had narrowed to survival, and in that state, dangerous thoughts began to feel acceptable. The fifth night arrived quietly, wrapped in heavy clouds and steady rain. Thunder echoed through the hills, masking every other sound. The resort felt completely cut off, as if the world beyond the mountains no longer existed. Inside the room, the air was tense and suffocating. Ayan had not slept properly for days, and his thoughts were no longer stable. Fear, anger, and obsession blended into a single dark resolve. As the night deepened, the situation inside the room spiraled beyond control. What began as overwhelming emotion turned into violence. There were no witnesses, no interruptions, and no chance for reason to return. In the isolation of the storm, Ayan acted on the thoughts that had been building inside him for days. By the time the rain slowed, Niara's life had ended. Hours passed before dawn. Ayan remained inside the room, unmoving, surrounded by silence. Slowly, panic gave way to calculation. He began thinking about appearances, evidence, and escape from suspicion. The remote location suddenly felt useful rather than frightening. He cleaned what he could, erased signs of struggle, and opened the balcony doors. The height, the fog, and the slippery floor offered a story that could be believed. As morning light crept through the curtains, Ayan forced himself into calmness. He studied the scene carefully, adjusting small details to match the story forming in his mind. By the time resort staff noticed something was wrong, the moment of truth had already passed. What remained was a carefully staged scene meant to hide a brutal act. The honeymoon, meant to mark the beginning of a shared future, ended that night. One life was gone, and another was forever changed. The storm outside faded, but the damage inside that room could never be undone. By late morning, the stillness of the resort was broken by sudden activity. Staff members gathered near the building as authorities were contacted. Ayan appeared shaken but controlled, presenting himself as a grieving husband overwhelmed by shock. He explained the incident as a tragic accident, blaming the slippery balcony floor and poor weather conditions. At first glance, the story seemed believable. The remote location, the rain, and the lack of witnesses supported his claim. Local police arrived and secured the area. The surroundings were carefully examined, and Niara's body was taken for initial inspection. Officers noted the calm manner in which Ayan answered questions. He repeated the same version of events without hesitation, maintaining a steady tone. However, small details quietly raised concern. The balcony railing showed no signs of damage or struggle. The distance of the fall did not fully match the injuries observed. These inconsistencies were subtle but important. Inside the room, investigators noticed an unusual level of order. Items that should have been disturbed during an accidental fall were neatly placed. The bed appeared untouched, and personal belongings were arranged with precision. The scene lacked the chaos normally associated with sudden tragedy. Forensic teams marked faint impressions on the floor and slight marks on Niara's arms that suggested something more than an accident. As the investigation continued, resort staff were questioned. Their observations added new layers of doubt. They mentioned the couple's isolation, canceled plans, and tense behavior. Ayan's late-night movements were also quietly noted. What initially looked like a simple case began to grow complex. By the end of the day, the tone of the investigation shifted. Authorities no longer treated the incident as an unfortunate mishap. Without accusing anyone directly, they began looking deeper, aware that the truth was hidden beneath carefully arranged appearances. As investigators dug deeper, attention shifted from the physical scene to the digital evidence left behind. Niara's phone, laptop, and cloud storage were sent for forensic examination. At first, many folders appeared empty, as if recently cleaned. However, specialists recovered deleted files, old photographs, and encrypted documents that told a different story. These records revealed a past identity linked to unresolved legal complaints and financial deception across several cities. Bank statements showed irregular money transfers made years before the marriage. Multiple accounts were connected through false names and temporary addresses. Investigators also discovered travel records that contradicted the timeline Niara had shared with her family. Her life before marriage had been carefully rewritten, and the evidence suggested deliberate concealment rather than coincidence. While Niara's hidden past became clearer, another discovery changed the direction of the case. Digital logs showed that Ayan had accessed these files during the honeymoon. Timestamps confirmed he opened the email account and documents shortly before the incident. This placed him at the center of the discovery and raised serious questions about motive. His calm behavior now seemed rehearsed rather than natural. Investigators reconstructed the sequence of events using device activity, internet access logs, and surveillance footage from common areas of the resort. Ayan's movements during the night did not align with his statement. The digital trail quietly dismantled the accident theory, replacing it with intent and awareness. What began as a private secret uncovered in isolation had now become central evidence. The past Niara tried to hide, and the actions Ayan took after discovering it were now permanently recorded. Technology, indifferent and precise, preserved the truth when human stories began to fall apart. As questioning continued, pressure slowly exposed weaknesses in Ayan's version of events. His earlier confidence began to fade as investigators revisited details he had casually mentioned before. Small changes appeared in his timeline. The time he claimed to be asleep no longer matched digital activity records. His explanation of where he was standing during the incident shifted slightly with each retelling. These inconsistencies were minor on their own, but powerful when combined. Surveillance footage from the resort added further doubt. Cameras showed Ayan leaving the room late at night and walking through a corridor before returning much later. His movements were calm and unhurried, contradicting his claim of sudden panic. Staff testimonies confirmed hearing footsteps and movement during hours he said he was asleep. The image of a shocked husband no longer fit the evidence forming around him. Forensic reports delivered another turning point. Medical findings confirmed injuries that could not have resulted from a simple fall. Marks on Nyara's body indicated restraint before death. The pattern suggested force used at close range, not an accident caused by rain or imbalance. The staged nature of the scene became undeniable. As the case tightened, Ayan's isolation grew. He stopped maintaining eye contact during questioning and appeared mentally exhausted. The calm exterior he once used as protection began to crack under factual pressure. Investigators no longer searched for what happened, but focused on how it was planned. By the end of the reconstruction, the narrative had completely shifted. The honeymoon accident story collapsed, replaced by a clear sequence of intent, action, and concealment. What Ayan believed he could control through silence and planning had turned against him. Every detail he overlooked now worked as evidence, guiding the investigation toward a single unavoidable conclusion. The arrest took place quietly, without resistance. Ayan Rathor was taken into custody as investigators finalized their findings. News of the case spread rapidly, first through local reports and then across national media. What stunned the public most was the speed with which a newly celebrated marriage had turned into a criminal investigation. Images from the wedding resurfaced, now viewed through a lens of disbelief and horror. As details emerged, public opinion became sharply divided. Some focused on Nyara's hidden past, questioning how such a history could remain undiscovered. Others emphasized that no secret, no matter how damaging, could justify taking a life. The case became a symbol of how obsession with image and control can spiral into irreversible violence. Social media discussions intensified, dissecting every known detail of the honeymoon and investigation. In custody, Ayan's composed appearance faded. The reality of confinement replaced the illusion of control he once relied on. Legal proceedings moved forward as evidence was formally presented. Digital records, forensic reports, and surveillance footage formed a strong and consistent narrative. The accidental fall theory was officially dismissed, leaving no room for alternative explanations. Nyara's family faced public exposure alongside private grief. Her past actions were revealed in detail, reopening wounds they believed were long buried. They mourned not only her death, but the life she might have rebuilt. The case drew attention to the dangers of unresolved histories and the consequences of living behind constructed identities. As charges were announced, the story reached its peak. What began as a private discovery in a remote resort had become a national example of how fear and secrecy can destroy lives. The arrest marked the end of freedom for one man and confirmed a truth that could no longer be hidden. The trial of Ayan Rathor captured the nation's attention. Courtrooms were packed, journalists documented every hearing, and the story dominated news cycles for weeks. Evidence from digital records, forensic reports, and witness testimonies left little room for doubt. The defense tried to argue emotional instability and temporary loss of control, but the deliberate planning and careful staging of the scene made these claims weak. The prosecution portrayed a chilling picture of obsession, betrayal, and premeditated violence. Over months, details of Nyara's past surfaced, but they did little to soften the severity of the crime. Her history of hidden identities and financial deception explained the secrecy, but could not explain the fatal outcome. Ayan's motive, centered on fear of exposure and desire to control his narrative, was clear. Each reconstructed moment of the night confirmed that what seemed like an accident was a calculated act. When the verdict was announced, Ayan was sentenced to life imprisonment. The news reverberated through Jaipur and beyond, leaving families, friends, and the public stunned. While justice had been formally served, the human cost of the tragedy remained enormous. Nyara's family faced grief intertwined with public scrutiny, and the community struggled to reconcile the image of a respected man with the act he had committed. The remote resort returned to quiet solitude, its walls holding the memory of that fatal night. For those who knew the story, it remained a haunting reminder that secrets can have dangerous consequences and obsession can override morality. The honeymoon, which should have symbolized love and unity, instead became a permanent scar in the lives it touched. Two lives ended differently than anyone could have imagined, one in death and one in a lifetime of imprisonment and regret. The stories serve as a stark warning that the pursuit of control and fear of exposure can destroy everything, leaving no true winners be.